Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
So we had our observation yesterday and working in our small groups with your kiddos. How do you think it went overall?
I think overall it went pretty well. I think with the different ways that they were introduced to the types of problems, they were able to understand a little bit better.
Did you see some of those misconceptions you thought would happen?
Yes, just this is the first time they were using the distributive property in this way with fractions, so that was something that a lot of them did have misconceptions with.
I loved the way that you did the distributive property with that rainbow going over, because then you could actually see the kids do that on their whiteboards. You could see, even if they weren't sure before how to do it, you could see them look back at your model and try it that way and then do that work underneath, which I think is like so important. That was a great thing. So the goal of our observation was to kind of pre-identify during the lesson, right? The kids who would need like additional help with that standard, and then kind of going back, because those were some kiddos who were struggling before, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that went in terms of like the number of kids or who you saw was struggling?
Let's see. Based just off of their exit ticket, more than half of the class understood and it seemed like they mastered the standard. And then I had about 9 students that didn't master the standard, and they had struggles with either their fluency, like their multiplication facts, or they didn't know how to use the distributive property in the right way.
Okay.
So they would be able to do one step but not the second step.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the second step, was it still part of the distributive property, or was it that mixed number, turning the fraction greater than 1 into the mixed number?
It was a combination. So
Okay.
like a lot of them were able to multiply the whole number with the other whole number in the mixed number. They were able to do that, but then they wouldn't distribute the whole number to the fraction part of the mixed number. And then if it was a fraction greater than 1, they struggled with converting it into a mixed number.
Okay. And so you can continue to add that then to the color, your color data that you've been collecting. Were there any new things that you noticed with kids, either for the kids who needed additional support, or like we talked about in the pre-conference, the kids who were kind of ready for that next step for enrichment?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So was there any like additional things that you noticed with kids, or things that maybe you were surprised about with kids who needed additional support, who maybe you didn't recognize prior to the lesson, or kids who you think, oh, they're really ready for that enrichment, they really have mastered that standard?
I had one student, there's an application problem with, it involved time, and he did like the fraction was 1/6. It was like 4 hours or 4 and 1/6. So he converted it on his own into 10 minutes. So 1/6 was 10 minutes, and he's one of the ones that does need enrichment. So he didn't get time to work on his assignment, but
that's okay. And so that's that's good to know that he needed that. And I saw a couple of kiddos in the back who were visiting from another class. They kind of the same thing, like one of them knew how to get it to minutes, and then I explained, like, so in 5th grade what we would have asked, that second part of the question would have said, like, how many minutes did they exercise or whatever, so they would have had to then do that conversion. So just thinking about that vertical progression, that's kind of what would come next, which might be a neat thing for him, even if so he doesn't have any wait time, to say, like, well, what else can you do with it, get him to start thinking about it. That would be interesting. So the only thing I was kind of wondering, or thought, like, I wonder how I could help support, is I noticed that there's a lot of kids who, like, they solve a problem and they want you to check it right away. And so even though you gave really clear expectations and said, we're working independently, we're working for this many minutes, you are still you're still having to, like, go to those kids and say like, yes, you're on the right track, or no, you're not on the right track. So how could we give them the tools to have a productive struggle and say like, so for these 7 minutes, we're not going to go over it. Just because I think there is a benefit to like letting them struggle. And then I remember Nicole said to me once, if I go around and I help 8 kids on number 5, and then I go over number 5 as a group, those 8 kids who I already helped are probably not going to pay as much attention to me because they got like my one-on-one attention. But also, if 8 kids of mine were struggling on number 5, then I should probably just pause and go over it with my whole group. But I know that difference between 4th and 5th grade is also that independent struggle, like knowing, do you see that a lot in that group?
Yeah. I mean, they do have a lot of trouble just staying in their seats too. I mean, I've noticed, but yeah. So what would you suggest? Like just having them, like me work in a small group while they're working independently instead of facilitating around?
Yeah, so I would say, so during this, and just give them a block of time, 7 minutes. I think usually, problem set, we want them to get to that 10-minute productive struggle, but not to the point of frustration. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah, I would suggest saying or putting on a timer and saying, so in the next 7 minutes, I can't be interrupted unless there's a real emergency. You can work independently, you can work with your table partner, and then be prepared for us to go over it. And so then when you're gonna go over it, say, let's take a quick consensus, show me with a fist of 5 or whatever, like which one did you struggle with the most? And then see, like, gauge, did most kids struggle with number 3? And so if so, like that's the one we wanna go over right away. So maybe just, I don't know, telling them that ahead of time. Yeah. I know they want to know that they're doing it right so that they can continue. I know that's how it's going.
Yeah, that productive struggle is important.
Yeah, I mean, I think you, there's a lot, you have a lot in that class. You have a lot of needs in that class, from like struggling kiddos who are in that like tier 3 level to like kind of tier 3 the other way, like you were talking about with your students. So and then obviously like not having your ESE support is a struggle, having additional kids in your class is a struggle, but you're like, you do it with ease, like you're smiling, you're go with the flow, like the kids are not rattled by having 6 extra kids in their room, like they're just moving along and doing those things. I mean, that's a tribute to you and like what you're doing.
Well, thank you. It was a Monday.
Yeah, it was a very Monday. I thought like all of your like cueing for the kids, like nonverbal communication, reminders to stay on track, even like your kiddos who are very challenging, reminding them like what the expectation is, but not escalating them is like something you should feel really proud of going home at the end of the day. Just being able to manage that while also instructing, while also meeting kids' individual needs is a lot. I think you're doing a really good job in there.
Thanks.
I think for your kiddos, who maybe do need that extra thing, so having something just prepared, so even if they don't have time to go onto a project like yesterday, that's really my only feedback for that level would be like, just in the same way we prepared like materials to do our tier 3 group or tier 2 group, what could we do to have something that's like readily available? So either a task card that's available or that like next step. So just, and sometimes that's like thinking on the fly and that's hard to prepare for, but like how many minutes would that be altogether, just so they're not sitting and waiting, because then when they're sitting waiting, that tends obviously to like not help the people around them. Well, is there anything else I can provide for you?
No, I liked a lot of the resources that you use, and I plan on implementing that today through Center. So I want to use the cards and the dominoes to do that mixed, to do the multiplication with them, because I think if they saw it a different way, then maybe it'll click for some of them that are still struggling to see how the repeated addition ties in with the multiplication.
Yeah, so when we put out the dominoes yesterday, so we figured out that there are 6 of each. So we were working with like 2/3, and it was like 8 2/3, but I'm like, we're gonna practice with 6. So it was we did like 6 times 2/3. And so what we talked about is like, this is the same thing. They knew the repeated addition part. And then we just kind of stood up that domino and said, this is 1 time, this is 2 times, this is 3 times. So then they could see this is 6 times the same thing. It's 6 copies of. We went back to like utilizing that language. So I do think they like that. And then for the cards, it was hard because there's a lot of cards, but we were making the mixed numbers. And so I just put cards out. And while I was cleaning up the dominoes from one thing, I said, find a 2, a 5, and an 8. And so they were finding a 2, a 5, and an 8. And it happened to be 3 times. And I was working with a group of 3. So they each found 2 and 5 8s. And we could show that this is 3 copies of that. So, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.